Iain Gray.
To ask the First Minister what engagements he has planned for the rest of the day.
Minister.
Later today, taking forward the Government's programme for Scotland, I should say to the Chamber that we applied yesterday evening for a derogation on the limits on drivers' hours, particularly initially for the interests of securing animal feed supplies. That may be applied and extended today to fuel deliveries. This is not something we do lightly, but I am sure the Chamber will appreciate, under the existing circumstances in Scotland, it is a wise move to make.
Iain Gray.
Will the First Minister agree that if his much promised 1,000 extra bobbies on the beat are actually bobbies stuck in the back room, then his promise on police numbers is just a con?
First Minister.
No, of course we have a record number of police officers in Scotland. 1,190 more than when we took office, and of course 1,190 more than were promised by the Labour Party at the last election. Unfortunately, despite the extraordinary pressure on Scottish budgets, thanks to our deal with COSLA, except the Labour Party, we have every opportunity to maintain these record numbers of frontline police in Scotland going forward. Everyone should welcome that achievement.
Iain Gray.
I am all in favour of police officers. I just think they should be out on the. I just think they should be out on the beat policing. The reality on the ground is, as described to me by a civilian custody support worker who contacted me to say that he is to lose his job, but only after he has trained a new police recruit who will replace him. He says, when you hear that my force has recruited 100 new officers, 80 or more will then be taken from that and placed within the custody area doing jobs already being done by custody security officers. The First Minister trumpets his 1,000 extra police, but they are being used to fill civilian jobs. Is that not a con?
First Minister.
The only cons that are going down in Scotland is the number of criminals, as we have got a 30-year law in recorded crime. So the test of frontline policing is in the crime statistics. That is what should convince even Iain Gray that there are 1,190 more police officers on the streets and communities of Scotland than in March 2007. But of course Iain Gray's track record in these matters is not very impressive. The 29th of August 2008, as a novice leader, he forecast it would take the SNP 13 years to keep their promise. Here we are, only 3 years later, 10 years ahead of Iain Gray's timetable, with the achievement of 1,190 additional police officers in Scotland.
Iain Gray.
The crime statistics are not testament to the First Minister. They are testament to the work of police officers like...
Order.
They are testament to the work of police officers like DI Paul Swinburne from East Kilbride.
Order.
30 years service. This year, 10 murders solved, 50 housebreakings solved, 8 drug dealers brought to justice, 5 commendations, a Royal Humane Society award, 2 police medals. Surely he is exactly the kind of dedicated police officer we want. No, he's being released. Why? So he can be replaced by cheaper probationers, so the SNP can get their 1,000 police officers. Does the First Minister think the police should be protecting the public or protecting his election pledges?
First Minister.
Yes, of course, the drop in recorded crime, the lowest crime statistics for 30 years in Scotland, is due to the work of front-line police officers. And thankfully, there are 1,190 more of them than there would have been under the Labour Party. And of course, this process goes on, because in the COSLA negotiations, as we negotiated to maintain the number of frontline police officers, every other party in Scotland saw the priority in keeping that in place, except the Labour Party, who don't regard this as a priority in Scotland. So a political party which went into the last election promising 0 extra police officers, which then forecast it would take 13 years for the SNP government to achieve the target of 1,000 extra police officers and were proved wrong, and now in local authorities are doing their best to scupper the deal that will maintain police numbers, can do many things. But they can't come along to this chamber with a shred of credibility and start weeping crocodile tears for police officers in Scotland.
Iain Gray.
It is the real experience of real experienced police officers and civilian support staff that I bring and which the First Minister treats with contempt. When I was a Justice Minister, we worked to release hundreds of police officers from backroom work in order to do their job on the streets, and we worked to keep experienced police officers in place. Every time we hear the First Minister say 1,000 police officers, we should remember it's a con. Support staff are being sacked so they can be replaced by police taken off the beat. Experienced officers are being forced out. Grampian Police called it naive. Unison have called it a cosmetic political exercise. Last week, the First Minister admitted he wasn't telling the whole story on tax powers. Yesterday, he had to admit he wasn't telling the whole story on the gathering loan. Today, will he admit he's not telling the whole story on police numbers either?
First Minister.
If I were Iain Gray, I wouldn't remind the people of Scotland of the days when he was Justice Minister. When he was Justice Minister, crime in Scotland was much higher than it is today. Now, Iain Gray claims, despite not backing a single extra police officer in Scotland, despite his extraordinary misforecasts, that he is the voice of Scottish policing. Well, why don't we listen to the real voice of Scottish policing, the Scottish Police Federation? Today's decision to maintain existing numbers of frontline police confirms our feelings that the politicians have listened to our pleas, shared our concerns and have responded accordingly. We now call upon local authorities to step up to the mark and match the government's commitment. The 17th of November, 2 weeks ago. So there's no doubt where the voice of frontline police officers stands. The only doubt is that some local authorities, the Labour ones, may not share the commitment of COSLA and this government to maintain the record 1,000 extra police officers in Scotland so that we continue to force down the levels of recorded crime to levels unheard of when Iain Gray was a disastrous Justice Minister.